After 10 years of devoted service to Peterson Engineering, they attempted to replace me with a younger engineer, but I returned as their new CEO and took charge of everything they had previously denied me. "Don't you dare. You're not going to deny me this opportunity," I said, raising my voice as I stood in the doorway of Thomas Miller's office. The department head looked up from his desk with a contented grin that made my stomach turn. How it would end. "My name is Kay Thompson, and I am 52 years old. I have worked for one of the top engineering firms in San Francisco for the last 10 years. During 3 company reorganizations, 2 recessions, and numerous late nights honing designs, I had proven myself to be invaluable, or so I thought." Thomas motioned for the person across from his desk to sit down, his voice carrying that practiced empathy that HR must teach in. The words, "We're bringing in someone younger for your role. After 10 years, it's time to move on," hung in the air between us. I felt the familiar heat of indignation rising in my chest, but I took a deep breath because this wasn't the time for an emotional outburst. I nodded calmly and sighed, appreciating Bedew's response. Thomas blinked briefly, which was obviously not what he had anticipated. "All right, I'm glad you understood that the transition would occur over the course of the next month and that you would need to train your replacement, Olivia, who will graduate from Berkeley next week." I grinned broadly, and of course what Thomas was unaware of, and no one in the department knew, was that the next board meeting would be extremely special. "Will there be a—" I asked my voice to be steady, and he said, "I'll announce it at the department meeting on Monday." Thomas turned back to his computer screen and dismissed me, saying, "He will be in touch about your severance package." I got up, smoothed my blazer, and noticed that the quarterly board meeting was still scheduled for next Thursday at 2 p.m. Thomas looked up. Thomas's eyes narrowed as I said, "Yes, but that's not something you need to worry about anymore." Just double-checking my calendar. "Yes," he said, "but that's not something you need to worry about anymore." "Well, I won't take up any more of your time." I shrugged as I left his office, feeling oddly at ease, just as 10 years at Peterson Engineering had taught me. As I made my way back to my desk, I couldn't help but smile at the irony of it all. 10 years of dedication reduced to a casual conversation, and the importance of having patience, resilience, and knowing when to speak and when to keep quiet. The next board meeting would reveal everything, and Thomas Miller's smug satisfaction would vanish faster than morning fog on the bay. Some secrets were worth keeping even when you were being shown the door. Dismissal in a 15-minute meeting. But here I was with information that would totally change the course of events. "Everything okay?" I asked Javier, my coworker from the cubicle next to mine. His eyes were filled with genuine concern. He had witnessed too many people walk that same path from Thomas's office, faces drawn with shock and disappointment. "Never better," I said, in a voice low enough to avoid I hadn't disclosed to anyone I've meeting with CEO Catherine Davis 3 weeks prior, but it was an unexpected call that came straight to my personal cell on a Sunday afternoon while I was taking care of my rooftop garden. "Kay, we need to talk about your future at Peterson," Catherine said in her typically formal but laid-back and straightforward tone. "Not at the office. Can you meet me at Bayview Cafe?" "I'll get right to the point," Catherine remarked after we exchanged greetings. No one aboard is on board. The recollection of that morning was still clear. Catherine had arrived early, reserving a quiet corner table with a spectacular view of the Golden Gate Bridge draped in morning mist, restructuring our leadership style. "I've been anticipating bad news rather than praise as I've been watching your work on the Westlake project, where your creative solutions saved us millions and impressed our biggest clients. Thank you, but when we want you on the executive board," Catherine has persisted, "and as our new Chief Operations Officer, you comprehend both the technical and the offer, which was unexpected and overwhelming, was a seat on the board that would oversee all operational aspects of Peterson Engineering, including Thomas's department." I asked why I was still processing the enormity of the opportunity, and Miss Catherine simply replied that it was time for someone to be at the table who understood what it's like. I had signed the contract with just Catherine and the company's legal counsel present for 3 weeks, and I had attended early morning strategy sessions under the guise of a vendor. Catherine had suggested that we be in the trenches, and while a board vote is merely a formality, I must carefully manage the politics because some members, especially those with ties to Thomas, might try to meddle if they knew beforehand. While Thomas was planning my removal, I had meetings on my calendar, reviewed confidential reports, and assisted in creating a new operational framework after hours. When I returned to my desk, I saw a message from Catherine and a contract file announcement that was still pending for Thursday. I texted back a single thumbs-up emoji, and I spent the remainder of the afternoon carefully preparing transition notes for my alleged replacement, Thomas. The weekend dragged on endlessly as I prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most consequential week of my career. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office early, dressed in the same professional attire I'd worn for years. Nothing that would signal the impending climax. He passed by twice, looking pleased with himself each time, allowing him to enjoy this moment of perceived victory. My status changed and the department meeting was set for 10 a.m. As engineers and project managers filtered in, the main conference room was bustling with the typical Monday morning energy of conversations about weekend activities, project deadlines, and industry gossip. Thomas entered last, and I took my usual seat near the middle of the table, not too prominent nor too hidden. "Chun, good morning, everyone," Thomas said, clapping his hands together. "Before we dive into project updates, I have an important announcement." This was followed by a young woman I had never seen. She couldn't have been older than 23, with a nervous smile and wide eyes that took in the room with undisguised excitement. "I'd like to introduce Olivia Parker, who will be joining our team as a senior design engineer over the next month. She will be working closely with Kay, who is leaving us to pursue other opportunities there." It was the corporate euphemism for being pushed out. Several of my colleagues looked in my direction, sensing what was coming, and I kept my expression neutral as I looked inquisitive and sympathetic. Thomas went on to say, "Kay has been with us for 10 years, implying that he was giving me a tremendous honor by recognizing my service and that we value her efforts. Please make Olivia feel welcome as she transitions into this important role," he said. Olivia waved, and I'm thrilled to be joining the team because I've heard nothing but positive things about it regarding Peterson Engineering. As the meeting moved through project updates and quarterly targets, I noticed Thomas closely observing me, possibly anticipating a tantrum or other indication of distress. Despite this, I participated normally, sharing insights about my ongoing projects and offering to assist with a difficult client issue. Olivia tentatively approached me after the meeting when Miss Thomas Afry gestured for her to follow me to my workspace and call me Kay. "Said you'd be showing me the ropes this week, of course," I replied, feeling sorry for Olivia as we walked, realizing that she was only a pawn in Thomas's game and was not aware of the complex dynamic she had entered. "First thing you should know," I said when we arrived at my desk, "is that engineering at Peterson is as much about the next 3 days were a blur of knowledge transfer sessions, project handoffs, and meticulous documentation of my workflow. Throughout it all, I maintained my professional demeanor, giving Olivia every advantage I could without disclosing my true intentions. Politics is about technical skill, and Olivia looked surprised by my candor. I thought it would be more merit-based, so I smiled when I said, "Maybe someday it will be again." "Do you know what this is about?" Catherine asked me casually as she passed my desk after she called a company-wide meeting on Wednesday afternoon for Friday morning, the day after the board meeting. The email mentioned exciting organizational changes and new leadership announcements. Thomas read the message with a frown, obviously unaware of whatever Catherine had planned. "I have no idea," I lied with ease. "Perhaps they finally found someone to fill that VP position that's been vacant." He nodded, satisfied with my ignorance, and left. Thursday was drawing near quickly, and with it came the moment of truth. Thursday morning came with a strange sense of calm that I had carefully planned for, picking out my attire with special attention. I arrived at work to find my farewell party in full swing, a depressing spread of supermarket cupcakes and lukewarm coffee in the break room, and a tailored charcoal suit I had bought for the occasion, accented with a subtle jade silk blouse that brought out the green in my eyes. It was an executive look, but no one would question it as being particularly out of character for me. My coworkers had signed a card with generic well wishes and recollections of the projects we worked on together. I graciously accepted their condolences while performing my part in this corporate theater. "We'll miss you around here," Javier said, giving me an awkward side hug. "It won't be the same without your problem-solving magic." "Thank you," I replied, implying that many of these individuals were actual co-workers who weren't involved in Thomas's machinations. Thomas stood at the edge of the crowd, checking his watch frequently. The board meeting was at 2 p.m., and, since I had assisted in designing the reporting framework years prior, I knew exactly what was in his quarterly presentation. "Could I see you in my office concurrently?" he asked, not waiting for a response before leaving, and 15 minutes later, I sat across from him. As he shuffled papers on his desk, I wanted to thank him for handling this transition so professionally. He said without looking up, "It's refreshing considering your tenure with the company." The addition of "in tenure" made it clear that he was referring to my age, so I responded evenly. When Thomas finally looked at me, he said, "For severance, packages for 2 months is generous." Thomas's expression says, "I've learned to prepare for all contingencies in my time here." I appreciate that he leaned back in his chair and the paperwork will be ready for your signature tomorrow. Curiosity finally got the better of him, so I have to ask, have you been surprisingly calm about all this? Did you see it coming? I allowed myself a small, mysterious smile. His eyes narrowed at my cryptic response, but before he could press further, his phone buzzed with a reminder. "I need to prepare for the board meeting." "Of course," I said, standing to leave. "Good. Luck with your work. I'm sure you understand, not completely. Hardened slightly. Well, companies need to evolve. Fresh perspectives become necessary." Presentation, I've always found the board to be very detail-oriented. As I left, I felt his eyes on my back and noticed a new level of uncertainty in his gaze. My calm acceptance had sowed the seed of doubt exactly as I had intended. Back at my desk, I received a text from Catherine. "Conference room A through 30. And I spent the next 2 hours carefully setting up my desk and backing up personal information. I was just being thorough before I left at 1:25. So I picked up my leather portfolio and went to the restroom, which was a perfectly normal afternoon activity that wouldn't raise any red flags. Once I was out of sight from the engineering department, I took the elevator to the executive suite, which was on the top floor and housed the offices of senior executives, was waiting for me in the hallway today. Catherine's normally serious face softened with anticipation as she asked quietly, "Are you ready to make history?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, and realized that I was as ready as I'll ever be. The boardroom had its own private entrance, a door that I had never had occasion to use in my 10 years with the company. As the other board members were seated, she checked her watch and said, "Perfect. Thomas would enter through the main door at precisely 2 p.m., so let's make sure we are in place before heading together to the executive entrance to conference." Room A, where everything was about to change. The Peterson Engineering boardroom exuded power, and by 1:45 p.m., 10 board members were already seated and engaged in pre-meeting small talk, and Catherine nodded. The enormous mahogany table, which had witnessed decades of crucial decisions, was surrounded by 12 high-backed leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a panoramic view of San Francisco's skyline, a constant reminder of the heights to which the company had climbed. The 70-year-old chairman of the board, William Harrison, extended his hand to Miss Thompson, saying, "We're delighted to finally have you join us officially. Catherine has praised your operational insights," and I felt a brief wave of nervousness as I moved subtly toward an empty chair on her right, my designated seat. However, this quickly passed as several board members smiled in recognition. For the next 10 minutes, I was introduced to each board member. Most of them knew me from past project presentations or by reputation, but this interaction was different because I was now their peer rather than a subordinate reporting up the chain. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the main door opened, and Thomas entered. "Harrison, thank you for the opportunity," I said, maintaining a steady tone of voice despite the importance of the moment. He approached each board member by name while carrying his presentation materials and exuding confidence. As he moved around the table, setting copies of his report at each seat, his gaze came to rest on me. His expression changed subtly, but clearly from one of bewilderment to one of disbelief to one of alarm. "Kay, what are you doing here?" he asked in a high-pitched voice. Before I could reply, Catherine stood a little higher than usual, commanding the attention of the room. "Oh, let's begin," she said, motioning for everyone to sit down. "Before we move to department reports, I have an important announcement." Thomas stood there, his eyes darting between Catherine and me, as he obviously tried to piece together what was going on. "Please take a seat. As you are all aware, Peterson Engineering has been undergoing strategic restructuring to better position ourselves for the challenges ahead. Following a thorough evaluation, the executive committee and I identified critical operational improvements needed across all departments. Thomas fidgeted with his pen and stopped looking at me. "So led this." Catherine instructed him to wait. until he complied before continuing. I'm happy to announce that Kay Thompson has accepted the position of Chief Operations Officer, effective immediately. A round of applause filled the room, and several board members nodded in agreement with me. Catherine continued to work, and soon we needed someone with deep institutional knowledge, proven technical expertise, and the ability to bridge divisions within our organization. As COO, I would oversee all. Thomas's face was devoid of color as she explained the operational aspects of the company, such as engineering, production, supply chain, and quality assurance. Catherine's voice was firm and clear, and she explained that all department heads would report directly to me, creating a more efficient decision-making process. I was unaware of this reorganization, he stammered. A decision was made 3 weeks ago, and Catherine responded evenly on the necessity to. Although the executive committee unanimously approved Ms. Thompson's appointment, William Harrison leaned forward to say that her first task would be to conduct a thorough review of all departments, identifying inefficiencies and opportunities for growth. I finally spoke in a measured and professional manner, and I'm looking forward to working with all department heads to maximize our everyone contributes value to this organization's operations. But sometimes the right position is needed to maximize that value. Thomas's eyes met mine, and I understood the subtle message that his department was under my purview. His decision to replace me would now be subject to my review. Catherine said, moving the meeting forward. And let's move on to the quarterly reports, Thomas. I think you're first. The self-assured department head who had fired me days earlier was gone, replaced by a man who abruptly began to doubt every choice that had brought us to this point. As you started, I gently interrupted, saying, I'd like to discuss the staffing changes you proposed earlier this week. Perhaps we should revisit some of those decisions that were silent. After the meeting, Thomas suggested that we talk about departmental staffing. His voice sounded strained, so I responded in a neutral tone that since it impacts the quarterly projections you're going to present, we should address it. Then, I turned to the board, and Thomas suggested replacing our senior design engineer in the position I held until today, with a recent graduate who has no prior experience in the industry. A number of board members exchanged worried looks as the Westlake project entered its most crucial phase. I persisted in keeping important personnel the same, which now unnecessarily jeopardizes the timeline and budget. William Harrison frowned. Is this correct, Thomas? The Westlake contract accounts for 20% of our yearly revenue. Folder shook a little in his hands. I thought new ideas would help the team. He said, I think we can reassess with a new organizational structure. I agreed, and I've already talked to Diana Ford about taking over the position. Her 15 years of experience and familiarity with the Westlake specifications make her the Thomas's normally confident delivery of his quarterly report was marred by hesitation and frequent references to notes. When he finished, the board members' questions were pointed and occasionally critical, which was a stark contrast to the straightforward decision. Logical choice, Catherine nodded approvingly. Is an excellent engineer. He usually enjoyed the reception, but as the meeting went on and we covered other departmental updates, I took thorough notes and asked insightful questions that showed how well I understood the company's operations. By the time we got to the new business items, the dynamic in the room had changed, and board members were asking me more questions than Catherine or near the end of the meeting. Catherine presented another agenda item. As part of our restructuring, we will be reviewing the age demographics and succession planning strategies of each department. According to recent data, cross-generational collaboration has produced our most creative solutions. She showed a slide that showed productivity metrics across various age groups. And as you can see, teams with a range of ages. I attracted Thomas's attention across the table by saying, I look forward to working with all department heads to optimize their team compositions. I will be leading an initiative to ensure we maintain a healthy age distribution throughout the organization. Experience and fresh perspectives both have value when properly integrated. The meeting was adjourned at 4:30 p.m. While the board members were gathering their materials and having post-meeting conversations, Thomas cautiously approached me and said, Congratulations on your promotion. He said, Had I known you'd have made different decisions, I would have finished for you. I understood him completely, and he nodded uneasily about Olivia, who is talented but inexperienced, saying that I believe she would benefit from our junior engineer development program. I said, Don't you agree that Thomas knew he had no choice? Of course I'll inform her of the change. Oh, no need. I replied. I should welcome all new employees personally. I'll meet with her tomorrow to discuss her actual role and set appropriate expectations. Catherine joined us, effectively ending the conversation. The executive team is having dinner at Bayside. The sun was setting over San Francisco Bay when I said, "We'd love for you to join us," and I'd be delighted. I was gathering my notes as Thomas left, and Catherine watched him calculatingly until he either adapted or found himself increasingly marginalized. She said quietly that everyone eventually faces the consequences of their decisions. Some people had to deal with the fallout sooner than others. Today's turn of events was satisfying enough. The 10 years I had invested in Peterson Engineering had finally paid off, albeit not in the manner Thomas had intended when he called me into his office with that contented smile. I left the boardroom through the executive entrance, not as a visitor this time, but as someone who belonged there. Tomorrow, the company-wide announcement would make my new position official. There was a tangible buzz at the company-wide meeting. On Friday morning, with employees from all departments gathered in the auditorium, whispering rumors about the organizational changes Catherine mentioned in her email. I stood backstage with Catherine and the executive team, wearing a navy suit that signaled my new authority while still feeling nervous. Unexpectedly, I said that it feels right at precisely 9 a.m., when Catherine requested me to arrange her blazer. As Catherine ascended the stage to thunderous applause, I observed from the sidelines as she presented Peterson Engineering's future vision, which prioritizes innovation, teamwork, and strategic expansion. Then, to guide us through this next phase, Catherine said she was happy to present our new engineers who had worked with me for years stood in awe as I took the stage. Project managers who had witnessed my solutions save impossible deadlines cheered, and even the administrative staff with whom I had always maintained cordial relationships showed their approval. Thomas, seated in the third row, clapped as well. Chief Operations Officer K. Thompson. "Thank you," he said mechanically, and I started to wait for the applause to stop. I've had the honor of solving problems at Peterson Engineering for 10 years, and I'm honored to be able to help shape our collective future today. I outlined my vision for operational excellence, emphasizing collaboration across departments and generations. Experience and new perspectives are both extremely valuable, I said. After the presentation, staff members came to congratulate Olivia, who looked a little perplexed. She said, hesitantly, "Miss Thompson, I mean Kay, I'm a little unclear about my position now." I smiled reassuringly. Let's meet in my office in an hour. I think you have great." As the audience dispersed, I noticed Javier giving me a sly smile and a thumbs up from the other side of the room. Maybe he had suspected something all along. The move into my position as COO went more smoothly than anyone could have anticipated, and by Monday morning, I had moved into the top-floor executive suite. The difference between my former cubicle and this roomy corner office with windows overlooking the Bay Bridge was striking, but I made sure to bring the little jade plant that had withstood 10 years of engineering crises with me because I knew that continuity was crucial. My first official week was jam-packed with meetings where I got to know each department head personally, reviewed ongoing projects, and identified operational bottlenecks. Thomas had been noticeably subdued. Our first one-on-one meeting had been short and solely focused on his department's metrics. He avoided making direct eye contact and kept his responses to a minimum. He made a point of being visible throughout the building, visiting departments and speaking directly with employees at all levels. This wasn't just good leadership. It was a message that the barriers between executives and staff were being pulled down. On Friday afternoon, Catherine dropped by my office with 2 cups of coffee. "So, 1 week in, how does it feel?" I didn't boast or bring up our past interactions. Instead, I treated him with the same deference and professionalism that I showed all department heads. "Challenging in all the right ways," I said as she asked, dropping into the chair across from my desk. "To be honest, there is a lot of room for development. I've had years to consider what I would do differently if given the chance, and I confessed that Catherine smiled knowingly, which is precisely why you were the right person to ask." She nodded, looking pleased to be on board and impressed with your approach thus far. "William Harrison specifically mentioned your talent for asking the right questions." "Oh, and I thought you'd want to know that Thomas has asked to be transferred to our Seattle office. He says it's for family reasons," Catherine said, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, but we both know better," she said. "I thought about this news carefully, and let's approve it." Sometimes a fresh start benefits everyone. Catherine lifted her coffee cup. Cup in a tiny toast said as though it were a real executive.